let's get started.
Great. Well, it's 11 already. Good morning, everybody. My name is Eduardo Ortiz, and I work at the Institute for Disability Research Policy and Practice here in the Research and Training Division. And I would like to welcome all of you to another community of practice organized by Multicultural Disability Network and Training, the MULDINET project, that seeks community integration and inclusion of people with disability from multicultural backgrounds. Intersectionality of disability and diversity that includes many factors such as race, ethnicity, age, rural and frontier geographies, gender and gender identification, among other cultural elements that creates a complex context that need to expanded conversation like the one that we are going to have today. And also it is going to be an opportunity to learn in this community of practice activity for all of us. As part of MULDINET work, we have developed the IDRPP, other products that I invite you to look at. I will put it in the chat, the link. Some products includes storytellings, infographics, and additional information about this intersectionality that we are working on. Today, we have the privilege to have Emily Skadorwa, who will present about navigating the intersection of LGBTQIA+ and disability experience. Emily graduated from Washington State University with a Bachelor of Science in Psychology with a minor in Spanish in 2020. She is currently a master candidate at Utah State University for the Master of Rehabilitation Counseling program. She's also the sibling of an individual with a disability. Emily has been working in disability policy for about 5 years and advocating for disability rights for her entire life. And she is currently employed with the Institute of Disability Research Policy and Practice as a training development specialist. In her current role, she participates in training for person-centered planning, HCDS, final setting rule, and support employment services for individuals with disabilities. Just a few ground rule reminders before Emily starts with her presentation. First, I would like to invite the audience to introduce briefly in the chat so we could know a little bit about you, including your name, your organization that you represent, and your role. So if you put it in the chat, that would be great. Also, we would like you to keep your mic mute during the presentation. At the end, we are going to have some QA time. I would like also to remind you that this community of practice group is here to discuss, not to debate or argue. Also, any discussion should be focused. Please avoid any side of deviated conversations. Please keep an open mind and be open to learning something new. Be respectful of others. Listening is as important as talking and avoiding making assumptions. Finally, ask questions politely to gain understanding and clarity. With this in mind, Emily, it is your show, and welcome to MULDINET Community of Practice.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Eduardo. I really appreciate it. I am so excited to be here today and speak on LGBTQIA+ and disability experiences. This is something that has been near and dear to my heart for a very long time. Like Eduardo said, I have a sibling who has a disability. Also, I'll let you all know that I do identify as a queer woman, and I use she, her pronouns. So I will just put that out there. And also, I'd like to say in the chat, when you do present where you're coming from and why you're in this meeting and such, if you could identify your pronouns if you're comfortable as well, that would be amazing so that we can make sure we're referring to you in the correct way. So yeah, let's get started. So of course, this presentation is focused on embracing diversity. So we're embracing intersectionality and the queer experience and disability experience. So starting off, some more rules for the presentation. We want to make sure we're using people first language, of course, because we're going to be talking about, especially with disability issues. Please don't use any antiquated terms such as wheelchair bound or the R word, of course. Use respectful and dignified language, and save questions for the Q&A session at the end, please. Alrighty. So we are first going to just jump in, and I just want to kind of define some common, like the acronym itself, and then also other common words that are used in the language of LGBTQIA+ community. So hopping right in, I thought we should probably just define the acronym first for those who are not aware. So the acronym LGBTQIA+ starts with lesbian, and that is those who are women and are attracted to women. Another definition as well can be non-men attracted to non-men, which is a more modern interpretation of that. So then there's also gay, which is people who like people of the same sex, which often referred to with men, but it also can be for all genders and sometimes can be used as an umbrella term for some individuals. And then there's bisexual, people who may experience attraction to multiple genders. Transgender is someone who identifies with the sex opposite or different from the one that they were born with and has no relation to sexual preferences. Queer is those who identify with sexuality that goes beyond heteronormativity and what is usually accepted in society. Intersex is those who are people who are born with genital organs of both sexes or none, and it is a genetic condition. Asexual is defined as those who are less comfortable and not as interested in sexual contact with others. But with all of these different types of identities, you know, they all exist on a spectrum. And so that's why I want to hop into what we love to see, the gender unicorn. And this is a pretty common infographic that is used in LGBTQIA+ education. And so basically, as you can see, there are, I think you can see my pointer. So, all right, so up here with gender identity, right? So we see each of these different aspects of gender identity have kind of a scale or a spectrum, right? And so you can lie anywhere on the spectrum on these different categories, right? So with gender identities, there is female, woman, girl, whichever, you know, is most connected to what you identify with. Male, man, boy, and then other genders or lack of gender as well. So, you know, this unicorn right here, you know, is in this kind of part of the spectrum here with gender identity, identifies less with male identity and maybe more with other genders as well. And then it goes into gender expression. So gender identity and gender expression are different. So identity is, you know, the identification that you place yourself with on the spectrum, and expression is how you show that, right? And so there are varying levels of femininity and masculinity, and as well as an other, which sometimes can be identified as androgyny as well. So the lack of femininity and masculinity, or the combination of femininity and masculinity. And then, of course, there is the sex that is assigned at birth, which, you know, usually female and male, but there are instances, many instances of those who are intersex and are assigned other at birth. So, and then going into physical versus emotional attraction, there's also on a spectrum. Physical attraction towards women, men, or other genders, or those who do not identify with gender. Emotional attraction, you know, the romantic and, as it says, emotional attraction to other people. Some people have neither of these. And some people, you know, if you identify maybe as asexual, you are much lower on physical attraction and maybe higher on emotional attraction. And then there's also those who might be aromantic as well. So they identify a lot less with this and maybe more with that physical attraction piece. So it all basically what I want to communicate is that, you know, every single person is different and it exists on a spectrum, and our identity and our interests and our desires exist on a spectrum. So, not one person has the exact, if someone identifies as gay, as queer, that doesn't mean they have the exact same interests and desires as another person who has that same, uses that same identity label, right? So I think this is a really great representation of that. So I just wanted to get started with that and make sure to establish that. And what we're going to go into next is a little bit more of the disability and LGBTQIA plus and identity, LGBTQIA plus identity in research. So what we have seen in research with the minimal research that has been conducted on this intersection, from what we've seen, there is a high prevalence of LGBTQIA plus identities within the disability community. So as you can see in this chart, about with any disability, there's about 36% in this particular study that identified in the LGBTQIA plus community, which is higher than that of the general population. And so that, just kind of shows the prevalence of this, and that it is a intersection that is alive and well and exists. And also, when it comes to LGBTQIA plus identity in research, there are a lot of things that we need to work on, right? So the recognition of historical and ongoing exclusion is one that is definitely touched on within research, but it's something that we want to amplify and amplify the importance of including LGBTQ plus individuals with disabilities in this research, as well as, with inclusive and community-based services and the research regarding those, we want to recognize community as a part of identity and building on the strengths and the resilience of LGBTQ plus individuals with disabilities. And as well as there needs to, it's a call to action basically to include individuals with disabilities who have this intersection in inclusive research practices so that we can learn more and we can provide adequate services for these individuals. Also, there is a prevalence of a lack of dignity being given to individuals with disabilities who identify as queer. In the study, it noted that people with intellectual disabilities, their opportunities to forge and sustain personal relationships are rare, and especially those forging those sexual relationships, and it can be highly contested in a restricted space for these individuals. And it's really important that we recognize the ideas of, especially with those with intellectual disabilities, the ideas of cognition and over restriction of sexual experiences, sexual and romantic experiences, frankly, for individuals with disabilities. So, when working with individuals, we need to recognize that people with intellectual disabilities can and are LGBTQI plus, and that paternalism and heteronormativity and prejudice, it can really facilitate very negative attitudes within our organizations, and it can, it can further marginalize the individuals that we are served. And speaking of marginalization, I just wanted to touch on intersectionality quite a bit. As we can see, there's a lot of information here. There's a lot of different identities being presented in this infographic. As you can see, what we are focused on today is within these few brackets here. So with neurodiversity, mental health, and physical ability, there are different layers in this particular example of power dynamics. And so within the center of this infographic, that is where there is typically more power being held in societal standards. And then as we go out into the outside of the diagram, that is where those who have this identity seem to experience erasure and marginalization in our society. So as you can see with with this, we see neurotypical being that can hold the most power in society, and able-bodied and mental stability. And then we see master neurodivergency and unmasked neurodivergent and intellectual disability is those that experiencing the highest levels of marginalization. And then looking over here to the LGBT related parts. So, those who are monogamous and heterosexual and identify as cisgender, they experience these higher power dynamics, while those who are visibly gender nonconforming and visibly part of the community will experience more marginalization on average. So what do we do with this information? So one thing that we do know from several studies is that more than one level of stigma with individuals, including those who have disabilities, those who experience mental health issues, and those who are part of this community, they often face like a multi-layered level of stigma that can lead to something that's called minority stress, and it can lead to even to lower life expectancy. It can lead to just lower quality of life in general. And so the purpose of pointing out this intersectionality is to see that this is a very that intersectionality really builds on itself and power dynamics build on themselves. And so it's really important that we address this intersection and we advocate with and for these individuals. So with that, I'd love to move on just to some common terms also that I wanted to just establish in the beginning. We'll talk a lot more about language later in the presentation and how language is ever changing. But I did want to point a few things out just so we were aware of what these terms meant if I said them throughout the presentation. So starting off with queer, which is a very misinterpreted word at the time, and in the past was historically used as a derogatory term when used as a noun. So when calling someone a queer, that is what is considered a slur to a lot of people. But when used as an adjective, it is an umbrella term to describe individuals who do not identify as straight or cisgender. So it can be a little bit confusing, but in the age that we're currently in, it is a very commonly used word. I would still, when referring to an individual, I would definitely check with them first and clarify the language that they are most comfortable using in reference to them. So I just wanted to get that out of the way because I do refer to LGBTQIA+ also as the queer community, and that can be used interchangeably as well. And ally, so that's going to be someone who supports and respects members of the LGBTQIA+ community. An active ally is those who take action in support and respect. Homophobia is another umbrella term. It is the range of negative attitudes. Phobia is, there's a little bit of misunderstanding about what phobia means here. It can be fear. It can be fear of those who are part of the community, but it's often more intolerance, resentment, or erasure that the individuals experience, and a general discomfort as well. So yeah, and then also with transphobia, there is a similar issue there as well. It's often discrimination or hatreds towards transgender individuals. And both homophobia and transphobia can be extremely dangerous to people's mental and physical well-being. So yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way if those were terms that I might use throughout the session. So yeah. Okay. This is something that I wanted to touch on most specifically during this presentation, dignity and disability. So first, we'll start off by defining dignity. So dignity refers to the inherent worth and respect that every human being deserves, regardless of their status, beliefs, abilities, or background, right? It means treating oneself and others with honor, understanding, and compassion, and upholding dignity involves recognizing that every single human being has the intrinsic value to have their rights and choices and options respected. So how, in this context, how can we advocate for the dignity of individuals with disabilities? So for this, we have a few case scenarios that we're going to go through. These are actually, obviously the names and situations are changed for confidentiality purposes, but a lot of these examples are, they're problems that I have come in contact with myself. Excuse me one moment. And it is, it's something that I've seen firsthand, and then also I do know are issues that happen often in when providing disability services to those who are LGBTQIA+. So starting off with Angela. So Angela is a 46-year-old woman living in an HCBS residential home. She wants to attend the LGBTQIA+ Pride Month Festival in Salt Lake City. She wants to go to this event to meet other people in her community, and her two roommates, Sasha and Paul, are not part of this community and are not interested in this event. She gave 1 month notice before the event occurred, but since Angela only wanted to go to this event, her direct support staff did not put it on the calendar. So with this example, this is kind of an example of erasure, right? So we are not respecting and advocating on behalf of the individual to be a part of their community and recognizing community as a part of identity, right? So in a situation like this, there are correct things to do and there are not so good things to do. So one way that you can approach a situation like this as a direct support provider would be, especially if you are having these like monthly, a lot of the times in group homes, we'll do like weekly or monthly meetings to discuss different activities and such that we want to put on the schedule, right? So especially when an individual, advocates for wanting to be a part of self-advocacy in the community, there should be a lot of praise and advocacy coming from these direct support professionals in, Angela making the informed choice to attend an event like this, making sure that she has social and emotional support in this setting, depending on what her support needs are, and yeah, just supporting the individual in being a part of their community. So that's kind of the first example that I have. And we'll refer back to these individuals later in the training, and especially during the Q&A session if anyone has any questions. So this is Riley. Riley identifies as non-binary and uses they, them pronouns with their close circle. Riley is receiving supported employment services through a local agency for their job at Target. So basically, the job coach notices that Riley's coworkers continually use she, her pronouns when referring to Riley. Riley's visibly uncomfortable when they overhear this, but stays silent and continues working usually. So as the direct support professional, as the job coach, what do we do in this scenario? So I just want to point out what not to do. So you would think, especially if you really care and are, educated in providing, advocacy for individuals, we care a lot, and we care a lot about people being respected. So for some people, the immediate thought is we need to call them out. We need to call that coworker out, and we need to tell them that, that this coworker is using the wrong pronouns and that they need to correct themselves. And at times, things like this will cause a scene, and that's not exactly what we want, right? So you don't know, in a situation like this, we don't know, we don't have all the details, right? But the best thing for a support worker to do is to speak to the individual about the situation and get their perspective. So where are they at with it? How do they feel about others referring to them in that way? How do they feel about speaking up for themselves? How do they feel about advocating for themselves and asking that? Do they even want to? Is that something that is it something that matters to them, or is causing a scene um, or having having that conflict something that they don't want to explore yet? Are they openly out, and out meaning that you are sharing your identity with others? Which I would like to say also, yeah, coming out. If we have not heard of that before, coming out means sharing your identity openly. So with Riley, maybe they are not openly out in the community. Maybe they're openly out with just a close circle of friends. They're not comfortable sharing that yet with their coworkers. So we really have to check with each individual person and see where they're at. See, do they feel comfortable? Do they feel comfortable calling out the coworker? Would they rather do it in a private space, right? So not just immediately jumping to that first thought of, I have to advocate for them and I have to call them out and possibly start a fight, right? So avoiding that, but also, of course, we don't want to ignore it. That is also not the right thing to do, right? So we should receive informed consent to advocate on behalf of this person. But the best thing that we can do is we can empower the individual to advocate for themselves. So helping them, come up with the language of how to, if they need it, if they need support in communicating, coming up with the language of um, how can I communicate this in a respectful way? How can I communicate my needs and my identity and how I want to be referred in the way that I want to communicate it? So, and then there's also, if this person truly is facing discrimination by coworkers and any kind of hate speech or anything like that, of course, as a job coach or a DSP, speaking to upper management about a possible discrimination issue if the problem continues is extremely important to get on record. But this would be after an initial confrontation and a conversation with this person. So yeah, that is Riley's situation. Okay. All right. So our last case scenario for this presentation is going to be about Samuel, who uses he, him pronouns. So in this situation, Samuel is an autistic 25-year-old man who lives in an HCBS residential group home. So recently, he's been questioning and discovering his sexuality and has decided that he identifies as a gay man. His group home staff are extremely supportive and empower Samuel to begin dating men and begin education about safe dating and navigating romantic relationships. So after this initial conversation with the DSPs and his group home manager and everything, and giving consent to the group home to communicate this with his parents. His parents are furious and state that he is just confused and doesn't know the impact of what this decision could mean for him. So the he is just confused part, that is a very common reaction to the queer community in general, to the LGBTQIA plus community in general, even those without disabilities. But when you you have that added layer of intellectual or developmental disability in this scenario, often these individuals are not taken seriously for their identification, and that adds another layer of possible not allowing these individuals to have that informed choice regarding their own identity and their own preferences um, and um, and just like their own interests, right? Just in general. But so how do we address something like this when there's a lot of support in the home and there's support from these sources, but there is concern on the guardian or parent side of things, and they're concerned about informed choice. So what should we not do? We'll start with that. So we should not, of course, not agree with parents and ignore Samuel's identity, of course. or invalidate Samuel, but what we really shouldn't do is attack the parents. There is a there's general misinformation about the lack of capacity for informed choice for individuals with intellectual disabilities. So, that lack of that misinformation that has been spread about this can cause a lot of it causes that misinformation and people to not be fully educated and informed of those who have disabilities to be provided informed choice and education and be able to participate in safe sexual relationships. So what should we do in this situation? So we should, of course, highlight informed choice in facilitating independence for Samuel, with Samuel, I should say. Have a conversation with Samuel and set up a meeting together with the family if he's comfortable with that, of course, and have him, explain his perspective, and also just providing education to parents and other family members about dignity and LGBTQIA plus identity. And the number one thing is just to empower Samuel to advocate for himself and to advocate in the highest capacity that he is able to his parents and to others. Self advocacy and pushing that self advocacy is extremely important. So, yeah. All right. And we'll come back to them in a second. Just one second. I'm gonna grab a drink of water. Okay. So, culturally informed disability services. So, we see that in disability services and other health professions and social professions as well, a lot of the times we as the providers can, facilitate that stigma and marginalization for the individuals that we serve unintentionally. And we can play a major role in perpetuating stereotypes and perpetuating stigma. So I want to talk about for a moment the role of a direct support provider. So, of course, the role of assisting with activities of daily living and instrumental activities of daily living and support in the community and such. But when it comes to identity, our role as direct support providers for individuals is to empower the individual to express their identity on their own terms, which is, what self-advocacy is. We should empower the individual and educate the individual on how to advocate for themselves, because that is our role. And we're not constantly just advocating for them. We're not speaking for them. We are empowering them, right? Also, seeking out educational resources for identity exploration and consent is extremely important. We want to make sure that that people are exploring these exploring relationships safely, but also with dignity. Also that touches on informed choice, through education and asking questions to the individual we're supporting. When it comes to identity, like asking these questions that maybe other people don't ask, so that you can be curious about their identity. So, how do you want to be referred to? Asking, how comfortable are you sharing how you identify with others? Who are you comfortable sharing your identity with? Right? So asking lots of questions to the individual to, to see, where do they stand with it, and making sure that we are not generalizing or stereotyping individuals based on, based on those factors. And like we touched on earlier, with going back to the gender unicorn, with the different, what's the word? The spectrum of gender identity, of gender expression, of romantic and physical attraction and everything. Everybody who, every single person who identifies with a identity label will have a different experience. We're all different humans. We all have different experiences with disability and with LGBTQIA plus experiences. So, if you think of it like when you're supporting an individual, you want to individualize, their disability services, right? So comparatively, when you're supporting an individual with disability, with things like, you know, um, with their communication capacity and such, right? Not every single person is going to know all the name, maybe signs like American Sign Language. Some are going to communicate very differently and communicate um, their needs and their emotions very differently, right? So thinking of it in that very individualized sense is how we can best support those who identify in this community. So I also wanted to touch on the power of language. So, for example, I mentioned earlier that the word queer it can give a flashback to some people to verbal abuse in the past. So it was, historically seen as a negative word, but for others, it has become a positive and all-encompassing kind of word for the community. And so it's very important to touch on the fact that language is rapidly changing all the time. At some point, the language you use now might not be what we see as appropriate, right? And it's just about keeping up, keeping your education to date, and and caring about what we um, how we can dignify individuals that are part of this community and any community really. There's a lot of uh, language that has shifted in the past in other communities too, like in the disability community. Um, in the past, the R word, like we mentioned earlier, was used and is now a antiquated term that is considered a slur, right? And so we need to make sure that we are just keeping up to date with the um, current data, current evidence-based practice, and current language when we're working with individuals. And just a few kind of do's and don'ts that based on our modern interpretation of these words. So, I won't go through all of these, but I do want to touch on the word homosexual versus saying gay. So I found this very interesting because I hadn't been able to put a word to why it felt wrong when someone referred to even me as a homosexual. So and in this graphic, it states that homosexual can kind of connotate a medical diagnosis or a discomfort with gay or lesbian people. And so that is one thing that kind of has changed over time, because that is something that was very acceptable to say maybe in the past, but now the preferred language is just to say gay or to say LGBTQIA plus, right? Um, so an example of that use would say, we want to do a better job of being inclusive of our gay employees. I want to um, do a better job supporting the individuals I support who are gay, who are part of the LGBT community. Another commonly misused uh, figure of speech, I'd say, would be born female or born male. So this is not considered to accurately depict the situation of individuals who identify as transgender. So what is used most recently is going to be assigned female or assigned male at birth. And a lot of the times that can be put as an acronym AFAB or AMAB. So the, this assigned language, assigned female at birth, assigned male at birth shows, that that was assigned to this person, that is not what they identify as, that is not what they are. So a way that you'd use this in a sentence was, Max was assigned female at birth, and then he transitioned in high school, right? And also, you know, uh, okay, so another kind of figure of speech would be, transgender and normal people. So say instead transgender and cisgender people, because of course this implies that saying normal implies abnormal, right? So that can be very stigmatizing way to refer to people. So yeah, these are just some of the, kind of do's and don'ts in language. There's quite a few more. I would really recommend doing your research on certain terms. We're not going to know everything, but I highly recommend looking into that as well. But okay, the big question that I know a lot of us have in our head, what do I do if I say the wrong thing? Like, what if I say, going back, what if I accidentally say homosexual, a homosexual, or a gay, or female bodied, or something like that? What if I forget and I say the wrong thing? You probably will, because we're all human. I think everyone on this call who's watching is a human. And the most important thing is to continue educating yourself and respect others' identities. And if you slip up and you say something that, is harmful to another person, just like anything else, you apologize, you learn, and you move on. And, especially like when it comes to a common example is going to be like when referring to someone as their identified pronouns. Especially if someone has changed pronouns recently and identifies maybe as with the they them pronouns and such, um, and switching over to a new using a new pronoun, it can be difficult. It can be hard to rewire your brain to do that, right? And you're gonna mess up, but not making a scene about it and just saying sorry, correcting yourself, and moving on. That's the best thing to do. So with any of these things, it's better to try than just ignore the community, because the erasure and ignorance toward community is going to be a lot more harmful than trying your best to provide inclusive practices. And I just want to share a few resources before we jump into the Q&A. So these are some local resources in Utah. So Equality Utah is a really great resource for for efforts towards LGBTQIA plus civil rights. I just wanted to make sure that I said that correctly. And they sponsor LGBTQ legislation and oppose negative bills. There's also the Encircle Community Resource Center, which has homes for mental health services and LGBTQIA plus youth. And then there is the Utah LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce, and it is a great place to meet other professionals and make business contacts and promote LGBTQIA plus community. Another thing that I have seen recently are a lot of really amazing educational opportunities for individuals with disabilities, specifically on healthy relationships and navigating gender identity and sexuality. So this is one that is being conducted at the Utah Developmental Disabilities Council training room. And I put the link in here for the Utah Parent Center website, which has the link for registration for this. And this is April 25th, so next month, about a month from yesterday. And this looks like a really amazing opportunity, and I've heard great things about it as well. So yeah, I would love to hop into the Q&A session if we're ready.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. That was such a great presentation. I've been typing notes like crazy, and I hope everybody else has been soaking up all your information too. Does anybody have a question? Feel free to unmute yourself to ask, or if you want to write it in the chat. I have one question I'll start us off with, actually.
Yeah.
So I've been live tweeting this as you've been presenting. And I got a response from someone on Twitter, X, whatever we call it nowadays,
Yeah.
that prompted a question. So as you are supporting someone and you're trying your best, I really appreciated that last slide that you shared of like what happens when I mess up, and we're human and we probably will, and it's okay, and we just keep trying to do our best. But as we're going about doing this and learning and doing our best with language and everything, how would you suggest we handle it when we come across maybe a coworker or someone in our network that is really just not open to any to these ideas? What have you found is a good way to you know, kindly but also educate and inform someone about these issues that's not really open to it yet?
That's a really great question. You know, the first thing that comes to mind is, you know, those there's this quote that's like, those who listen are listened to or heard, right? So the first thing that comes to mind is, you know, hearing them out. I know this is a hard thing to do, especially, you know, if you're part of the community, and hearing things that could be potentially hateful. I don't know if this is the perfect approach for every single person, but you know, hearing them out and asking questions and being curious. Why? So why do you think that? Where does that come from? Why do you like, where does that opinion come from? Where is that opinion, you know, within your ethical kind of your guiding ethical code? Where is that coming from, right? And so just being curious, and you know, knowing that you might not change someone's mind, and that is really hard. And you know, I am the kind of person who always wants to provide education and help people, you know, um, come to conclusions that are, you know, going to be more inclusive, right? But you know, just trying to give that person, um, I think like unconditional positive regard towards people is really important, and knowing that we all come from, you know, different backgrounds. But you know, if you're not open-minded with them, how can you expect, you know, someone to be open-minded with you, you know? So so just listening and being curious and knowing that you might not agree, but that you tried, right? So but if there is discrimination and within policy, you know, reporting that, of course, as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. So great.
Emily, we have two comments in the chat. I don't know if you read it. I can read it for you. And also, I have a question for you. So I'm going to read the messages that they put it in the chat as well. Becky said, thank you, Emily. Your comment about giving yourself grace with pronouns ran true. I have 3 friends who identify as transgender or non-binary. I struggle the most with the one that most recently changed their pronouns. One I never messed up as I knew them after transitioning, and the other I only messed up once. And Tish Clemens is saying, would you be able to send me the recording? I was with a client this morning and I missed this. So yeah, I think that we are going to have also a recording. Well, Mindy already is answering. You are faster than me. Yeah, and one
Yes.
question, one question that I want you to ask, and you know, listen your wisdom is related to our project, because we are looking at the intersectionality between diversity and disability. And when we are talking about diversity, we include other factors as well. And that can make it even more complex when we say the intersectionality between disabilities and LGBTQIA. And if we added another factor like age, it can be more complex. Or if we add an element of geography, like, you know, rurality or frontier areas, or do you have any recommendations to take in consideration that? Or I think race and ethnicity and culture maybe can play another factor when we are looking at this intersectionality that you are presenting about.
Yeah, so that, you know, kind of just brings me back. I'm going to jump back to, you know, that wheel of privilege that, you know, we discussed earlier in the presentation. You know, like Eduardo said, there are so many factors that can contribute to stigma and marginalization and in these different levels. of, intersectionality are really important to address. And so within a graphic like this, there's even more than this. But recognizing that another level of marginalization can add to this individual's experience as well. And those the layers of marginalization and power dynamics can really affect individuals. So yeah, I mean, my recommendation to those who are trying to become more educated on this topic is to educate yourself on all these different intersections. And there's a lot. There's kind of infinite intersections, honestly. So it's pretty hard. But the thing is like just becoming as educated as you possibly can and always being willing to grow and learn is what's so important, right? And so some might not think that marriage status or body size, right, are parts of this parts of marginalization and power dynamics and intersectionality, but they 100% are. So just being aware and increasing your education is always important. So yeah,
Thank you, Emily.
thank you.
Any other
Okay.
questions from the audience?
Thank you, Becky. Yeah, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone. Looks like we're rounding things out, but thank you so much for attending and being willing to be open and learn about this intersection of LGBTQIA plus identity and disability. Yeah, and I just really appreciate everybody joining. Looks like we have a post survey popping up. Yeah, I'll let Eduardo take it away.
Thank you, Emily. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and educating us. I think that it is a very important topic, and we are looking forward to expand those conversations and discussions in a constructive way. So appreciate, and Emily, you are always welcome to come back to our community of practice.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so as part of this community of practice, your feedback is very important for us. So please, if you can answer these post survey questions that you have in your screen, that is going to help us to keep improving those community of practice activities that our project is developing. So saying that, Mindy, do you have any last word that you would like to share?
I'm good if you are.
Okay. Yes, thank you, everybody. So please answer those questions. Thank you. Thank you.